So I just finished watching that Superman movie that came out this summer, and I didn't have high expectations of it, and so I don't have maybe a ton of formulated thoughts on it, but I felt like I wanted to speak about it because I thought it did a good job on certain things. Now, as far as Superman movies go, the first one came out when I was a kid. It was 1978. I was 3 years old. And Christopher Reeve was larger than life and so good. And those movies were good, and Gene Hackman and all these guys. So it was easy to like them and easy for me to hold that up as the gold standard for Superman movies. Now, at 50 years old, I kind of thought, this will probably be entertaining. I'll rent it. No big deal. And it started off kind of interesting, but had some tedious things that I didn't love. It eventually got its legs under it. And eventually it got momentum and made some interesting points and arguments and was entertaining enough to watch and fun and funny and gripping enough and certainly fantastical even for a Superman or superhero movie. So it's worth watching, and I have no interest in giving an exhaustive talk about that movie. But what I do want to talk about was maybe the point where it got its legs was when Superman had lost already to his kind of clone character, spoiler alert. And then Luthor and the other bad guys had gotten in and gotten the tape of his parents. And when they did, they decoded a message that Clark had never been able to quite understand the ending of, because there was just some kind of glitch maybe in the explosion when he left or something in the computer. So he just heard the beginning part that was nice, where his parents were saying, hey, we love you and go to this planet, blah, blah, blah. Well, the second half turned out to be kind of a gross message from these callous and arrogant parents. So basically what they were doing was utilizing this video, this recording that his parents had made for him, as a means to character assassinate him, using innuendo that because they made this video that ended up being kind of ugly and imperial and arrogant and disdaining of the planet Earth and its inhabitants, that it meant that Superman's real reason and goal for coming to this planet was to take it over, was to make as many hybrid Superman and Earth children and dominate the place, because his parents were talking like that in the video. And so initially the question was this valid? Did this really happen? Or was it a fake or something like that? And obviously, with the character that had found it, Luthor, who was the bad guy, it could have been fake. But I thought it was even better that it wasn't fake, because if they had made it fake, that's probably a really key decision. If it had been fake, you would have said, oh, Lex, you tricked everybody. It was really not a bad message. And that's kind of like the theme of Running Man, I think in the 80s or early 90s, where the idea was that all this fake footage made people believe that these guys that were really political dissidents were murderous villains. And then the whole point of the movie is for them to get out of the Running Man game and to exonerate themselves. But they were being character assassinated as well. So in Running Man, they used the fake footage thing. And that was a big thing in the 90s. And like we were maybe just getting into this kind of internet age. But in this Superman one, they chose to make the movie about the message being real. And so that's a big decision, because then the parents really are like that. And so the question is Superman like that? Because his parents were like that. But the question never gets asked, because it's innuendo, and because it's assumption, and because it's salacious, and because it's character assassination. They didn't sit there and say, wait a second, folks, just because Superman's parents were like this, that doesn't mean he necessarily is. No one was asking those questions. because it was a culture like ours that's rabid for bad guys, rabid for fresh meat, to someone to tear down, someone to blame, and for us to rush to judgment about a person. Let's jump on character assassination. Well, yeah, I always wondered about Superman. He did destroy this building. Or, but what about this? Superman helped me with this. And then it kind of would just become this hot take back and forth thing, and you saw the media starting to join in. So obviously it was a rationale to stop and kill and defeat Superman so that the powers that be could get their ways and Luthor can get his way. But it was just a nice moment. I almost wanted to freeze the movie and do the video then, because it was just great. It just showed how fallible we are when we're trying to discern what's going on with people. And people do regularly character assassinate. And you might think of it as being like a narcissist does it, or a politician does it to another. And certain politicians are constantly character assassinating others and accusing them of things that they didn't do or didn't say or didn't mean. And the populace, so weary of all this, is just looking to feel a certain way about it. And you can say, well, this proves I can't trust that side, so I'm going to vote for the other side. Or both sides are so bad now that it allows the person, the accuser, the demagogue, to do bad things himself. To say, hey, these guys did it. Look over there. So it ends up allowing and fostering the devolution of the culture, of the politics, and of the society, and especially of the society's capacity and the individuals contained therein. Their capacity to make sense is diminished. And in the movie, nobody stood up and said, hey, just because Superman's parents are dicks doesn't mean that he is. He's not them. He's not a clone of them. And so that would have been critical thinking. And the movie, just like us, just like our culture, our politics, our social media, didn't ask that question, because that wasn't the point. The point was that character assassination was a means to an end. It was vilifying a person who was not a villain. And so I thought, wow, great storyline, or at least a great facet of the storyline, was to have everybody believe a falsehood about a good person in order to rationalize the teardown of that person, the canceling of that person, the capture, the imprisonment, and intentional killing of that person due to that character assassination. And I thought to myself, wow, we do this all the time. This is kind of normal. And we watched it happen to politicians and athletes and other famous people, and maybe somebody you know and somebody you don't know. False accusations can be a way to character assassinate. And obviously the results can be deadly, like the Pizzagate thing where the guy goes up and shoots the place up, and he just believed it. We believe what we see. We want to believe in some authority. And so this movie, Superman, I just thought it was going to be some summer movie, and in most ways it was. Can he defeat the bad guy? Can they go into the other dimension and stop the bad guy? And all this stuff, which makes it fun and entertaining for the kids and whatever. But I think they showed that even the hero, the Messiah of the planet, trusted and loved by everyone, who time and time again would come out and stop the bad guy and save a person and care and be loving and be good, and then we would watch him in the movie have feelings and be so human, whereas in previous Superman movies he's superhuman. He doesn't have foibles so much. He's not like anxious or neurotic, where this guy was just a regular guy who happened to be super in body powers and stuff, and very good. But he came across as more Clark than Superman, and by design. And so I think the tension in almost any Superman movie is the question of like higher self, lower self. Is he Clark? Is he the mild-mannered and goofy, klutzy Clark, or is he the Messiah? Is he the God King? Benevolent, loving, watching over us all. And in that movie, for some reason, they chose to make him more of the Clark guy, but whose characteristics and goodness eventually came out through his being the Clark guy, being the good guy, being wholesome, being like his parents who raised him in Indiana, as opposed to his aristocratic parents that gave him away in Krypton. And that, the other movies didn't paint his parents as anything but noble. So that twist was interesting and worthwhile and made it fun. They made it their own movie that way. So I have to give them credit for some of those broader themes and choices that they made, because it allowed for that storyline to refresh the movie and make it rise above some of its own klutzy dialogue and limitations. It was kind of about the humanity of all the different superheroes that made their entrances into the movie, and just humanity in general, and that through our humanity do we find our strength. And so with Superman was saying, whatever my parents said, my strength is my humanity. I chose humanity. And just like Christopher Reeve did in the first Superman movie, where he found Lois dead and he turned back time with his Superman power, which his parents told him never to do, but he did so because he chose to be human. And he chose to love a human, as opposed to lording himself above everyone and being above the fray and being more like a priest, So the fact that this one actually went into some deeper themes, to me, made it more of a worthwhile movie in those ways. But the fact that they asked the question, or that intentionally didn't ask the question in the dialogue of whether a child is just the product of his parents, was the critical thinking mix-up and the misstep in the critical thinking that led everybody to just say, okay, yeah, kill him, take him away, screw him, he's done. He just wants to make $1 million. He wants to have a harem and all this kind of stuff that was kind of funny in the movie. And that's what we're doing 24/7, I think, in our nation, in our national discourse, in our political talks, in our talks about men and women, or trans people, or races, or immigrants, is that the conversation becomes more and more emotional and designed to be divisive. And that in this movie, where they used kind of innuendo that because his parents are like this, he must be like this, and they used some xenophobia, it allowed us to see it in the format of a movie where he was waylaid, harmed, almost killed, arrested, and almost, ended based on a lie. And or just based on innuendo, accusations, character assassination, and the lack of scrutiny, the lack of just critical thinking to even ask the question, are we just a product of our parents? Or because our parents, because his actual parents sent him here to lord over them, that he doesn't have his own free will, as if he was some automaton. And so obviously he didn't understand what his parents wanted him to do, because he never saw the message. But I guess the movie might be arguing too, is this a nature versus nurture question? And it's so, what the movie's saying, well, it's nurture. His sweet, wholesome Midwestern parents raised him right, so he became who he was. Or that he just happened to be good, and just because his parents gave him the genetics they had, doesn't mean that the arrogance and hate and etc. were handed down genetically. That genetics don't make you good or evil. That nurture helps, and that you also have your own free will. You have volition. So it ends up being somewhat of a philosophical movie without lording it over you, without Dark Knight-izing it, and making it like, okay, I get it. You're doing monologues about it and stuff. So in that sense, I really felt like, okay, you got me on that one, James Gunn. Not bad. So it certainly wasn't heavy-handed because it was like a summer box office tentpole kind of thing. So, I was glad that it could get my intellect thinking and remembering and noticing about the character assassination thing and seeing like the danger of character assassination and the dangerous times we live in are that information can be used against us, and all it takes is rumor sometimes to create a problem whereby someone good can be character assassinated. And be it that people misunderstand or that someone's deliberately trying to character assassinate you, intentionally or unwittingly or out of force of habit, or to shield themselves from blame or responsibility. Whatever it is, that can catch like wildfire, and that can like ruin a career or a life, or someone that you want to trust you doesn't trust you because someone said something that wasn't true, or was a twisting of facts, or taking something out of context. So no one in that movie stood up and said, well, just because Superman's parents are assholes, does that mean that he is? Because it was a nation on the brink. It was a nation that was scared and worried, and with media and social media and propaganda and tyranny and fascism afoot, the people are constantly being manipulated like that. That's the point. They're not going to give their power over to you if you tell them everything's fine. You got to scare them into thinking that those people are going to take their rights, and these people are going to take their jobs, and those people are going to take their women, and these people are going to turn your kids into trans, or turn them gay was maybe the thing some years ago. So when you've got to keep the populace afraid, and then when they're already afraid and suspicious, well, then all you got to do is just feed them something to direct it at, and then that person suddenly is like guilty until proven innocent. And I was glad the movie could do that. I was glad they could sit there and show us how it works, because I think we have to see that and we have to catch on. And for me, movies are sometimes how I catch on to how I need to be a hero in my life. But they also can show us, mirror our culture to us, and say, well, that is sick. That is poisonous. There's so much poison going about. There's so many characters, especially in the government right now, that just lie. And the people are so busy and so frantic trying to just make enough money that they'll believe the opposite of what is true. And that those very brazen individuals, demagogues, will just say the opposite of what actually happened. And the people just take them at their word because they're powerful. And lying is a symbol, a very powerful symbol. If you're willing to lie, you're willing to do anything. So on an intellectual level, someone like me will say, hey, this person in office is a liar. I would never vote for them. But somebody who is afraid would say, aha, we finally found someone who is strong enough to lie. So on a more of a genetic kind of survival instinct level, the people that are worked up about being and scared of everything and scared of everything that's going to happen, they want to see somebody who isn't scared. And so it's through lying and deception that one can prove how they're not scared of the consequences of their lies. So it ends up being, I don't know if it's ironic or what, what opposite day word do I use there when lying is proof of strength? When fear dominates, lying is proof of strength. And so, of course, the demagogue sets up the domination of fear. He comes in to town and demagogues on the issues and gets everyone frenzied up and against all these people, and so that when he lies and keeps lying and lies about things that they know aren't true, then they can say, aha, we finally found our strong man. But the whole premise is wrong. We don't need a strong man. The strong man's actually the bad guy and everything's inverted. So what do you do when everything's inverted and the lies are proof of strength? And people who maybe that aren't even good or great are character assassinated with lies. Like something like Joe Biden stole the election or something cockamamie like that. Like, he's just a guy. He's all right, he's not great. He wasn't like a great politician, or I was never a fan, but he sure as hell didn't steal some election. So when the brazen lies do assassinate someone's character, and people can get away with that, there's trouble. Wow. Sorry, there's just some cool horned owls here. See, that's where we are. And yeah, of course, this is going to turn into a political spree. That was what this was about. Like, they were showing us our politics. But it's also not even just in politics. It's like on the personal level, you can hear or see yourself or your friend, or somebody you know, or somebody who loses a job, or a situation happens where character assassination goes on. And you think, wow, you really don't have any power when people lie about you. And it's dangerous. And it's scary because you don't know what consequences will come. And so, to the extent that we're all vulnerable to that, we should kind of take heed and say, wow, I sure don't want that to happen to me. I sure don't want somebody to pull up some message that guilt by association. That's what it is. Yeah, so the point I was making earlier, and I'll make now, is that they were saying Superman was bad because of guilt by association, because his parents were gross. And but guilt by association isn't real. It'd be like, hey, John, I hear you know 3 drug dealers. Okay. So I also know 4 priests. Am I a priest or a drug dealer? So guilt by association and innuendo and xenophobia and not using the critical thinking to decode these things and put a name to the face, these are the ways we lose our freedom and lose our capacity to think along the way. Losing our capacity to think and discern and make sense of the world are the steps on the way to losing your freedom into fascism. So it's not just, oh, I'm dumb, I fell for that. But it's that you fell for that at your peril, because nobody's just going to come along and propagandize you just for fun. They're propagandizing you for a reason. They want your rights. They want your vote to not mean anything. They want you on your knees. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm fired up about politics and anti-Trump and all this stuff, because they want you on your knees. They want to make ungodly amounts of money. They want to pay their buddies off. They want to get more power. They want to hold on to that power. They want to evade responsibility for previous crimes, future crimes. And so the means to the end is by misleading, is by lying, is by character assassinating, is by using fallacies to trick you into not knowing what to believe anymore and not knowing how to get to what you believe. It's not just not knowing what to believe. Did he do it or did he not do it? It's not knowing the way there anymore. You don't know how to get there anymore because you don't critical think anymore. Because you either digest everything you get and say, okay, thanks, that's the truth, or you don't believe anything you hear and everything's a conspiracy and it's convoluted. And so finding your way intellectually in this time is really difficult. So I'm not saying it's easy and everybody should be embarrassed that they're not as interested in it as me or something like that. But the point is, I'm just some dude watching a movie, and I clued into this, and I see the picture. I don't necessarily know what to do with it. What am I going to create, like a critical thinking website or school? Like, I'm sure they exist, or a program that you go around the high schools or whatever. The point is, the movie showed us, it mirrored what's going on in our culture, just to a small extent, just enough to make a plausible movie theme, idea, problem. But it's all too real in our world. We don't know what's true. We don't know who to trust. We don't know how to discern anymore. And so when I talk to people, I feel like it's okay if we disagree, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend like what you're saying makes sense when I can hear all the critical thinking errors along the way. It doesn't mean that I've necessarily come to the correct conclusions. It's just that a math problem, if you make a mistake anywhere along the way, is always the incorrect answer, period. So algebra is critical thinking. What step did he mess up? Oh, he didn't divide there, he multiplied. Or he forgot to carry the number, or whatever it is, you'll find it, it's there. And logic is like that too. Logic and reason are similar. Now there's more nuance maybe, because there might be connotation and denotation, but we can actually see this. If I can, so can you. You can see where the error in judgment, the misstep intellectually happened, and then you can say, oh, okay, no wonder I believe that. I've always believed this thing. I never noticed that they were using a bandwagon fallacy on me. I didn't see that they were doing an ad hominem attack on him. So once you clue yourself in, you can say, okay, I see this now. I can actually discern. But the difference is people don't want to discern, because when they do, then they have to. Then they have to think. And some people just want to turn it off and no politics. Like, do you want to be like living in a third world country dictatorship? You want to live in the place they're trying to make? You better start thinking. And then you can just watch stuff like what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. Like, the dude and the people started fighting back against Disney, and then they got Kimmel back. And you say to yourself, well, who cares? It's just Jimmy Kimmel. It's just some guy. It's just a TV show. It doesn't really matter. And he said the same thing. The reason why it matters is that a fascist is a momentum machine. It's a great white shark. They got to keep moving. And when you defeat him, just with Jimmy Kimmel and making Disney lose money enough that they change their mind, and ABC, and then he comes back on and has a monologue like that rips Trump to shreds, it dispels all that fear and it stops all that momentum. And all of a sudden, Trump has to change the story to Jim Comey getting arrested or indicted or whatever on some literally trumped up charges. And so he's got to distract us again from the Epstein files, because that's all he can do, because he's named in it. You know, it's, of course he was at that island 7 times, and that was his best friend. And I'm sure he did nefarious things, saw nefarious things, paid for nefarious things. And maybe so did a bunch of other people. And when people say that, well, Bill Clinton too. Well, Bill Clinton's not the president. And if you found out that Bill Clinton did that stuff, you'd arrest Bill Clinton. Quicker than shit. So you got to pay attention. And people want to just spiritually bypass, just get out of it and just kind of think, well, it'll work itself out, or it's not my problem, or they're all the same. Both sides are bad. Both sides didn't attack our Capitol and try to stop the vote count on January 6th. So sorry, folks, but you actually have to actually know what's going on locally, somewhat, and nationally, internationally. You got to see, like, there's wars going on all over the planet. It affects your prices. Obviously, jobs are down and inflation's way up under Trump. Even if it was none of this stuff, it's just that the economy's worse. So even if you were just trying to pick who's going to help the economy more, not the crazy asshole, not the guy who's putting tariffs everywhere and threatening to take countries over and et cetera. So you just got to use critical thinking, and you got to be in the game. You got to pay attention to politics. You got to know what's going on. And all those forces that want to tell you, oh, they're all the same, that's Russia. That's Trump. Those guys want you to stay out of it and take it over. So if you have Trump, if you have a dictator, you never have to deal with politics again. You never have to worry about it again. So yeah, that's real easy. You don't have to worry. We don't have to worry our pretty little heads about it, but we won't be free either. And our forefathers, who weren't necessarily valiant in every way, these were slave owners and, complex people that happened to also go and make a nation that was free, where people could become free, where landowning white guys had power, and we staved off the most powerful nation in the world, England, and became a nation where eventually people could say, excuse me, this document kind of says this, so why does my skin color mean that I don't get to enjoy these rights? And then amendments were made, and so the forefathers and their armies, and these guys fought and died in the woods barefoot so we could be free, or so we could fight for our freedom, so we could try to hold on to it, or try to give it, share it, make that rights and freedom umbrella expand to gay people, to women. And they fought for it too. Women did it all themselves too. Don't give me any credit for women getting women's rights. So to act like, oh, we just gotta, yeah, it's just too ugly. I want to keep my high vibe. It's all about vibe. It's like, is it? What about being a free citizen? What about keeping the best, biggest, healthiest, and longest running democracy ever, in the modern world at least, going, so that your kids won't be in a dictatorship where they could be shipped off to the gulag because they look at somebody wrong. So it's kind of like everything's cool is part and parcel of being so free that you don't understand that it is not guaranteed. So that's my spiel on that. And let's remember how character assassination can just be one of the many tools and tricks of nefarious people in a society, in a culture, in a nation, that use that and these tools in order to trick you into believing something false, so that they can use that as a means to an end to either usurp someone, to get elected again, like happened with Trump, to hold on to power, to get more power. The Reichstag fire, that's how Hitler got more power. He was just the chancellor. So it's always for some reason. The trickery is for a reason. And we've got to pay attention to it. You got to be able to spot it like I spotted in that movie, so you can see what's going on in your life, in your relationships with your family, with your friends, lovers, politicians. Who's tricking you? How? Why? How was it that you fell into it? How can you wake up from that? How can you never fall into that again? And how can you maintain your freedom, your happiness, your sanity, and maybe your job or your future? It's going to be because you use critical thinking. It's going to be because you know how to make sense of what's going on in your life. And anyone who's doing that to you, tricking, character assassinating, doing all these things, is doing so for a reason, something that they would benefit from. So you got to look for it, because it's not just in the movies. I hope that helps people.